There is a truth most people avoid admitting. I was not born disciplined. I did not grow up with perfect habits, relentless drive, or endless motivation. I am not the kind of person who always feels strong, clear, or ready. I have felt weak, truly weak. There were periods in my life when I knew exactly what I needed to do, and still could not bring myself to do it. I understood the importance of discipline. I understood the cost of procrastination. But every morning, my body felt heavy, my mind felt foggy, and the simplest tasks felt overwhelming. So I told myself the same lies many people tell themselves. I'll start when I feel better. I just need a little more motivation. I'll do it when my mind is clearer. But that moment never came. What came instead was guilt. A quiet, persistent guilt. The feeling that I was slowly abandoning myself. And eventually, I realized something uncomfortable, but essential. Discipline is not built when you feel strong. Discipline is built when you feel weak, and act anyway. If discipline only exists on good days, then it is not discipline at all. It is just temporary motivation. For a long time, I resisted the idea of forcing myself. The word felt harsh, rigid, almost cruel. But over time, my understanding changed. Forcing yourself does not mean punishing yourself. It means creating structure so clear, so simple, that your emotions no longer get a vote. Because when you feel weak, emotions are not reliable guides. I did not learn this lesson alone. I saw it play out in people close to me. Friends, family members, capable individuals with real potential. One friend used to say, "I'll start working out when I feel better." 2 years later, he was still waiting for that feeling. Not because he was lazy, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he placed his future in the hands of his current emotions. This audiobook was not created to excite you. It is not designed to give you a rush of motivation that fades after a few minutes. Its purpose is different, more grounded, more honest, more durable. This is for the days when you feel weak, the days when you don't want to show up, the days when self-doubt feels louder than discipline. In this audiobook, I will not tell you to believe in yourself. I will show you how to act even when belief is gone. You will hear principles I have tested personally, lessons learned from real failure, and examples from people who rebuilt their lives not through emotion, but through deliberate, practical discipline. Because here is the truth most people never hear. You do not need to feel strong to move forward. You need systems that work when you are weak. If you are listening to this right now and you feel exhausted, unmotivated, disconnected from the person you know you could be, understand this clearly. You are not broken. You are simply relying on the wrong mechanism. Strength is unreliable. Motivation is temporary. Discipline, when built correctly, is stable. This audiobook will not make you feel powerful overnight, but it will give you something far more valuable. It will help you stay upright when everything inside you wants to collapse. And sometimes, that is all it takes to change the direction of an entire life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why feeling weak is exactly why discipline matters. Feeling weak is not a failure, it is a condition, but most people treat it like a verdict. When they feel tired, unfocused, emotionally drained, or mentally overwhelmed, they assume something is wrong with them. They take weakness as a signal to pause their standards, loosen their commitments, and wait until they feel stronger. I used to do the same. Whenever I felt off, I postponed discipline. I told myself that discipline belonged to a better version of me. The motivated version, the energized version, the version that woke up clear and confident. But that version rarely arrived. And over time, I learned a hard truth. Weakness is not the reason discipline fails. Weakness is the reason discipline exists. Discipline was never meant to support you on your best days. It was designed to carry you through your worst ones. On days when you feel strong, action is easy. You don't need rules. You don't need structure. Momentum comes naturally. Those days feel productive, but they don't shape your character. What shapes you are the days when everything feels heavy, the days when your body resists movement, the days when your mind looks for comfort instead of responsibility, the days when your emotions argue against every meaningful action. Those are the days that define the direction of your life. There was a time when I misunderstood this completely. I believed rest alone would fix my weakness. I believed waiting would restore my strength. So I waited, and waited, and waited. Nothing changed. What actually happened was subtle but damaging. Every time I avoided what I knew I needed to do, I weakened something far more important than motivation. I weakened my trust in myself. That is the real danger of unchecked weakness. Weakness doesn't destroy your life suddenly. It erodes your self-respect quietly. Each delay teaches your mind a lesson. When things feel uncomfortable, we stop. When effort feels heavy, we negotiate. When emotions are loud, they lead. Over time, that pattern becomes your identity. I saw this clearly in people around me. Friends with intelligence and ability, but no follow-through. People who always had a reason to delay, always believed tomorrow would be better. One person in particular stands out. He was capable, ambitious, and aware of his own potential. But every plan came with a condition. He would start when he felt ready, when he felt clearer. When life slowed down, life never did. For years later, what changed wasn't his circumstances. It was his posture toward himself. He spoke with less certainty. He expected less. Not because he failed dramatically, but because he failed consistently in small moments. That's when it became clear to me. Discipline is not about maximizing performance. It is about preserving direction. When you feel weak, your emotions become persuasive. They don't scream, they reason. You've done enough. Skipping today won't matter. You deserve comfort right now. And the most dangerous thing about these thoughts is that they sound reasonable. Discipline exists to interrupt that conversation, not by demanding more energy, but by removing debate. Forcing yourself in this context does not mean pushing harder than you can sustain. It means refusing to let your emotional state decide your behavior. This distinction matters, because many people believe discipline requires strength. In reality, discipline is what creates strength over time. You don't become disciplined because you feel capable. You feel capable because you stayed disciplined when you weren't. During my weakest periods, progress didn't come from motivation. It came from committing to actions so small they bypassed resistance. I stopped asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" I started asking, "What is the minimum action that keeps me aligned?" Sometimes it was 5 minutes. Sometimes it was one task. Sometimes it was simply showing up and not quitting. Those actions didn't make me feel powerful, but they did something far more important. They restored my sense of control. And control is the foundation of discipline. When you act despite weakness, you send yourself a message. My emotions do not own me. And that message compounds. Most people wait for strength to return before acting. But strength is unreliable. It comes and goes. Life applies pressure without warning. If your discipline depends on how you feel, it will collapse the moment conditions aren't perfect. True discipline is built for imperfect conditions. I once spoke with someone who rebuilt his life after years of emotional instability. He didn't credit motivation or inspiration. He credited one decision: to act even when nothing inside him felt aligned. He said something simple but profound. I stopped trying to feel better first. I acted so feeling better could eventually follow. He didn't fix everything. He fixed one thing: consistency. One non-negotiable action per day. No matter how small, no matter how weak he felt, that single anchor changed his trajectory. This is the shift most people need to make. Feeling weak does not mean you are incapable. It means your usual sources of drive are unavailable. Discipline becomes the backup system. It doesn't rely on emotion. It doesn't require confidence. It doesn't wait for clarity. It runs on structure. And structure is what stabilizes you when your internal world is unstable. This chapter is not about eliminating weakness. That's unrealistic. Weakness is part of being human. The goal is to prevent weakness from becoming authority. When discipline functions even when you feel weak, it no longer feels like punishment. It becomes protection. Protection from inconsistency. Protection from self-betrayal. Protection from the slow decay that comes from always waiting to feel better. You don't need to be strong to begin. You need discipline precisely because you are not. And once you understand that, weakness stops being an excuse and becomes the reason you finally move forward. Chapter 2. Stop waiting to feel strong. Waiting to feel strong is one of the most convincing traps weakness sets. It sounds reasonable. Responsible, even. You tell yourself you're not avoiding action. You're just being patient. You're conserving energy. You're waiting for clarity. But strength is not something that arrives on schedule. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself, and it doesn't reward those who wait. I spent years believing that once I felt more confident, more rested, more certain, discipline would follow naturally. I imagined a future version of myself who would wake up ready, focused, and decisive. That version never showed up. What did show up were excuses that sounded intelligent, excuses that made delay feel justified. I'm not in the right headspace today. This week is just unusually hard. I'll start properly when things settle down. Life never settled down. And the more I waited, the weaker I felt. That's the part no one tells you. Waiting for strength does not preserve your energy. It drains it. Because every time you delay action, you teach your mind that discomfort is a reason to stop. Over time, your tolerance shrinks. Tasks that once felt manageable begin to feel heavy. Decisions feel harder. Resistance shows up faster. Weakness feeds on postponement. I learned this when I noticed a pattern in my own behavior. The days I delayed action were never followed by bursts of strength. They were followed by hesitation, doubt, self-criticism. Waiting did not make me stronger, it made me more cautious. And caution, when left unchecked, becomes paralysis. I saw this clearly in someone close to me. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't undisciplined by nature. He was thoughtful, analytical, and careful. Too careful. Every goal came with a condition. He would start when he felt more prepared, when his confidence improved, when he felt stronger mentally. Months passed, then years. His problem was not lack of ability. It was reliance on an internal state that was never stable enough to support action. That's when I understood something crucial. Strength is not a prerequisite for discipline. Discipline is the process that creates strength. You don't wait to feel capable before you act. You act, and capability emerges over time. Most people reverse that order and get stuck. They wait for certainty before committing. They wait for confidence before beginning. They wait for motivation before showing up. But confidence is built from evidence, and evidence comes from action. When you wait, you collect no evidence, no proof that you can handle discomfort, no proof that you can follow through. So your confidence never grows. This is why discipline must operate independently of how you feel. The moment you stop waiting to feel strong, something shifts. Action becomes simpler, not easier, simpler. You stop asking emotional questions. You stop negotiating with your mood. You replace them with structural decisions. At one point, I made a rule for myself. I was no longer allowed to delay action based on how I felt. If something mattered, it got a place on the calendar, not a place in my thoughts. This wasn't dramatic. It was practical. I stopped asking, "Do I feel ready?" I started asking, "What is scheduled?" That change alone removed an enormous amount of friction. Because weakness thrives in open-ended choices, it thrives when everything is optional. Structure limits that space, and when structure exists, feelings lose their authority. This doesn't mean ignoring your limits. It means refusing to let temporary discomfort dictate long-term direction. There's a difference. When you wait to feel strong, you place your future under the control of your present emotions. And emotions are unstable. They fluctuate based on sleep, stress, environment, and circumstances beyond your control. Discipline provides continuity when everything else is inconsistent. I once spoke with someone who rebuilt his routine after a long period of burnout. He didn't recover by waiting to feel energized, but he recovered by committing to one small action at the same time every day, regardless of how he felt. Some days it felt pointless. Some days it felt mechanical, but it was reliable, and reliability changed everything. Over time, that action became automatic, not because he felt stronger, but because he stopped waiting for strength to appear. That's the paradox most people miss. The more you wait to feel strong, the longer weakness stays in control. The moment you act without strength, weakness begins to lose its grip. Sanda, this is not about forcing intensity. It's about removing delay. You don't need to push harder. You need to start sooner. When weakness is present, delay multiplies it. Action diminishes it. Even imperfect action, especially imperfect action. Because every time you move forward despite uncertainty, you train a critical skill, the ability to operate without ideal conditions. That skill compounds. It creates resilience. It builds trust in yourself. It shortens the distance between intention and execution. Waiting does the opposite. It stretches that distance until goals feel abstract and unreachable. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable. If you require strength to begin, you will rarely begin. If you begin without strength, strength will follow. Discipline is not an emotional decision. It is a logistical one. Decide what matters. Decide when it happens. Then follow the structure, not your feelings. When you stop waiting to feel strong, progress becomes inevitable. Not fast, not glamorous, but consistent. And consistency, over time, becomes power. And the strongest people are not the ones who feel strong most often. They are the ones who learn to move forward when strength was absent. That is where discipline actually starts. Chapter 3. Force discipline by removing choice. Most people believe discipline is about making better decisions. It isn't. Discipline is about making fewer decisions. When you feel weak, decision-making becomes dangerous. Every choice feels heavier than it should. Every option invites debate. Every task becomes a negotiation between what you know you should do and what you feel like doing. And when weakness is present, feelings almost always win. I learned this when I noticed how often I talked myself out of doing the right thing, not because I didn't know better, but because I gave myself too many options. Should I do this now or later? Should I rest or push a little? Should I skip today and make it up tomorrow? Each question felt reasonable. Together, they destroyed consistency. Weakness thrives on choice. The more freedom you give your mind in moments of low energy, the more likely it is to choose comfort. Not because you're undisciplined by nature, but because your brain is wired to conserve effort when resources feel low. This is why discipline cannot depend on willpower. Willpower is a decision-making resource, and when you feel weak, that resource is already depleted. The solution is not to try harder. The solution is to remove the decision entirely. At one point, I stopped asking myself whether I would do certain things. I decided in advance. The action was no longer optional. It was scheduled, defined, and limited. No internal debate, no emotional assessment, no discussion. The task existed. I executed it. This shift was uncomfortable at first. It felt rigid, almost restrictive. But something unexpected happened, and the mental weight disappeared. When there is no choice, there is no argument. When there is no argument, there is no resistance. I saw the same pattern in people around me. One friend struggled for years to maintain a consistent workout routine. He was disciplined in many areas of life, but physical training always fell apart. Not because he lacked discipline, but because every session required a decision. Do I go today? Do I feel up to it? Should I rest instead? Eventually, he removed the choice. Same time, same days. Non-negotiable, no intensity requirement, just attendance. He didn't suddenly become motivated. He simply stopped deciding, and consistency followed. This is the core principle most people miss. Discipline is not built by repeatedly choosing the right thing. It is built by deciding once and eliminating choice afterward. When you feel weak, your mind becomes persuasive. It doesn't command you to quit, it negotiates. Just today, you can double it tomorrow. It won't make a difference. Those thoughts only exist because you've left room for them. Removing choice closes that door. This doesn't mean turning your life into a rigid prison. It means identifying a few critical behaviors and locking them in. You don't decide every day whether you brush your teeth. You don't evaluate whether it's worth it. You do it because the decision was made long ago. Discipline works the same way. The mistake people make is trying to apply willpower daily instead of building defaults. Defaults carry you when energy is low. During one of my weakest periods, I simplified everything. And I didn't aim for optimization. I aimed for inevitability. I asked myself one question: what actions must happen regardless of how I feel? Then I removed choice from those actions. Time was fixed. Duration was modest. Expectations were minimal, but the action happened. Some days it felt pointless. Some days it felt mechanical, but it always felt controlled, and control is what weakness takes away. When you remove choice, you reclaim control without needing motivation. You don't need to convince yourself. You don't need to feel ready. You simply follow instructions you already gave yourself. This is why discipline should be designed when you are clear, not when you are weak. Make decisions in advance. Define what happens on bad days. Lower the standard, but lock the behavior. Weakness loses power when it cannot influence behavior. And many people resist this approach because they think discipline should feel inspiring. They want to feel aligned, enthusiastic, connected. But discipline is not a feeling. It is a system, and systems outperform emotions every time. I once heard someone describe discipline in a way that stuck with me. Make your life boring enough that discipline becomes automatic. At first, that sounded unappealing. Then I realized how accurate it was. Boredom removes negotiation. Routine removes drama. Structure removes excuses. When you feel weak, excitement is unreliable. Structure is dependable. This is where forcing yourself actually becomes kind. You are not demanding more from yourself. You are protecting yourself from indecision. Instead of asking your tired mind to choose well, you choose in advance and let your tired mind rest. That's not punishment, that's intelligence. The paradox is simple. The more choices you remove, the easier discipline becomes. The fewer decisions you make, the more consistent your behavior. Weakness doesn't need to be eliminated. It needs to be rendered irrelevant. And removing choice is one of the fastest ways to do that. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your systems. Build systems that function when you feel weak. And discipline will no longer feel like something you have to force. It will feel like something that simply happens. And when discipline becomes inevitable, progress follows. Quietly, steadily, and without negotiation. Chapter 4. Lower the standard, not the consistency. One of the most common reasons discipline collapses during weak periods is unrealistic expectation. When people feel low, tired, or mentally drained, they often believe they need to get back to their best before taking action. They think discipline means performing at a high level every day. It doesn't. That belief turns discipline into pressure, and pressure, when combined with weakness, leads to avoidance. I learned this lesson after failing the same way over and over again. I would set standards based on how I wanted to feel, productive, sharp, focused, not on how I actually felt. When I couldn't meet those standards, I stopped completely. That cycle repeated for years. I would push hard on good days, exhaust myself, and then disappear on bad ones. I wasn't inconsistent because I lacked discipline. I was inconsistent because my standards were incompatible with reality. Weak days require different rules. Discipline is not about doing your best every day. It is about doing what is sustainable every day. When you feel weak, aiming for intensity is a mistake. Consistency is the real target. Lowering the standard does not mean lowering your ambition. It means protecting the habit. There was a moment when this finally became clear to me. I realized I had two choices on difficult days. Either do less or do nothing. And doing nothing was far more damaging. So I redefined success. Success was no longer doing it well. Success became showing up at all. 10 minutes instead of an hour. 1 page instead of a chapter. A single task instead of a full list. And these actions felt almost insignificant. But they did something powerful. They kept the pattern alive. Patterns matter more than performance. Every time you maintain consistency, even at a lower level, you reinforce identity. You prove to yourself that you are someone who does not disappear under pressure. I saw this clearly in someone close to me. He struggled with consistency for years because he believed workouts only counted if they were intense. On days he felt weak, he skipped entirely. Eventually, he changed one rule. Attendance mattered more than effort. Some days, he trained lightly. Some days, he left early, but he never skipped. 6 months later, his progress surpassed everyone who trained harder, but inconsistently. The lesson was simple. Lowering the standard keeps the door open. Quitting slams it shut. And weakness makes perfection impossible. But it doesn't make consistency impossible. The mistake most people make is tying their self-worth to performance instead of persistence. When they can't perform at their usual level, they assume the day is lost. It isn't. A weak day that includes a small action is infinitely better than a strong intention that leads to no action. Consistency compounds. Intensity does not. When you lower the standard, you reduce resistance. And when resistance is low, discipline becomes accessible again. This is not about tricking yourself. It's about respecting reality. Your energy will fluctuate. Your focus will fluctuate. Your motivation will fluctuate. Discipline exists to bridge those fluctuations. I stopped asking myself, did I do enough today? I started asking, did I keep the chain unbroken? That shift removed shame from the process. There was no failure, only adjustment. Lowering the standard also protects you from another trap, all or nothing thinking. When standards are rigid, one bad day feels like total failure. And failure invites quitting. But when standards are flexible and consistency is non-negotiable, bad days lose their power. You don't fall behind. You simply slow down, temporarily. That difference changes everything. Weakness does not require you to stop. It requires you to adapt. When discipline is designed with this understanding, it stops feeling fragile. It becomes resilient. And resilience is what carries you through long stretches of difficulty. Strong days are easy to respect. Weak days are where discipline proves its worth. Lower the standard. Protect the consistency. But if you do that, weakness will no longer break your momentum. It will simply change the pace, and the direction will remain the same. Chapter 5. Build discipline for bad days, not good days. Most people build discipline for the version of themselves that feels capable. They imagine discipline working when they are rested, focused, optimistic, and emotionally stable. They design routines that assume clarity and energy will be available. That assumption is the flaw. Good days do not need discipline, bad days do. When everything feels aligned, action flows naturally. You don't resist. You don't hesitate. You move because momentum carries you. But momentum is fragile. It disappears the moment stress enters the picture, the moment sleep is poor, the moment emotions become heavy, the moment life becomes unpredictable. That is when most systems collapse. I learned this after building routines that only worked when I felt good. On strong days, I was consistent. On weak days, everything unraveled. The routine wasn't broken, it was incomplete. It had no instructions for bad days. So when a bad day arrived, I improvised. And improvisation under weakness almost always leads to comfort-seeking behavior. Bad days require a different design. They require fewer expectations, clearer rules, smaller actions, less thinking. I had to accept a hard truth. If my discipline depended on ideal conditions, it was not discipline. It was convenience. Once I understood this, everything changed. I stopped asking, what should I do when I feel good? I started asking, what must still happen when I feel terrible? That question reframed discipline entirely. Bad days are not exceptions. They are part of the system. If your discipline does not account for them, it will fail repeatedly. And I remember a period when emotional fatigue was constant. Nothing felt rewarding. Progress felt slow. Motivation was absent. Previously, I would have paused my standards and waited for recovery. Instead, I defined a bad day protocol. It wasn't impressive, it wasn't ambitious, but it was reliable. One action, short duration, no evaluation afterward. That was it. Some days, completing that action felt pointless. It didn't feel like progress, but it kept something intact. Continuity. Continuity is everything. Bad days don't destroy progress by themselves. They destroy it when they break patterns. And once a pattern is broken, restarting feels heavier than continuing. I saw the power of this approach in someone who had struggled with depression for years. He told me his turning point was not a breakthrough moment, but a decision to never allow a day to pass without one small act of self-respect. Some days, it was a walk. Some days, it was cleaning one surface. Some days, it was simply getting dressed and leaving the house. Nothing dramatic. But those actions created stability when everything else felt unstable. Discipline on bad days is not about achievement, it is about preservation. You are preserving identity, you are preserving direction, you are preserving trust in yourself. Bad days try to convince you that stopping is reasonable, that rest should turn into retreat, that one skipped action doesn't matter. But discipline understands something weakness doesn't. What matters is not the size of the action. What matters is the signal it sends. Every time you act on a bad day, you reinforce the belief that circumstances do not control you completely. That belief compounds. Designing discipline for bad days also removes pressure from good ones. You stop overperforming when energy is high because you're no longer afraid of collapse when energy drops. You move at a sustainable pace. Most people exhaust themselves trying to make up for bad days. They push harder on good days, burn out, then disappear again. That cycle is unnecessary. Bad days are not debts that need repayment. They are conditions that need accommodation. When you plan for bad days, you remove guilt from the process. You stop judging yourself for feeling weak. You simply follow the protocol. No drama, no shame, no self-criticism, just execution. This approach transforms discipline from something fragile into something resilient. Resilient systems don't break under pressure. They adapt, and adaptation is what allows progress to continue over long periods of difficulty. The goal is not to eliminate bad days. The goal is to become functional within them. Once discipline works on bad days, good days become a bonus. Progress becomes steady instead of erratic. Confidence becomes earned instead of imagined. Most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because their discipline was never built for the reality of human weakness. Build yours for bad days. When you do, weakness will no longer threaten your progress. It will simply be another condition you already know how to handle. Chapter 6. Use identity when willpower is gone. Willpower is unreliable. It fades with fatigue. It weakens under stress. It disappears when emotions are heavy. If your discipline depends on willpower, it will collapse exactly when you need it most. I learned this after trying to push through weakness for years. On days when I felt drained, I told myself to be tougher, more determined, more forceful. Sometimes it worked. Most of the time it didn't. The problem wasn't effort. The problem was the mechanism. Willpower asks you to fight yourself. Identity asks you to act in alignment with who you are. That difference changes everything. There was a moment when I realized that asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" was the wrong question entirely. Feelings fluctuate too quickly. They don't provide stability. So I replaced the question. So instead of asking how I felt, I asked who I was becoming. What would someone who keeps his word to himself do right now? What would someone who doesn't disappear under pressure do? What would the person I respect act like in this moment? These questions bypass willpower. They don't require motivation. They require consistency with identity. Identity-based discipline is quieter than force, but it is far more durable. I saw this clearly in someone close to me. He struggled for years with self-control, not because he didn't understand what to do, but because he relied on bursts of effort. Eventually, he made one shift. He stopped describing himself as someone trying to be disciplined. He started describing himself as someone who follows through. That wasn't confidence. It was a commitment. Once that identity was established, behavior followed naturally. Not perfectly, but consistently. Identity works because it reduces internal conflict. When your actions align with how you see yourself, discipline feels natural. When they don't, resistance increases. This is why weakness feels so destabilizing. It threatens identity. It makes you question who you are and what you're capable of. Discipline, when tied to identity, stabilizes that uncertainty. Even when willpower is gone, identity remains. I stopped framing my actions as achievements. I framed them as confirmations. Each small act became proof that I was the kind of person who acts even when it's uncomfortable. That framing removed pressure. There was no need to perform. There was only a need to remain consistent with who I chose to be. Weak days became less threatening. They didn't define me. They tested me. As in, tests don't require emotion. They require a response. Identity also provides boundaries. When you know who you are, some behaviors simply don't feel like options anymore. Not because they're forbidden, but because they're inconsistent with your self-image. That removes decision fatigue. You're not forcing yourself. You're honoring a standard. Over time, this approach builds quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that depends on success, but the grounded kind that comes from self-trust. You stop asking whether you can handle discomfort. You already know the answer. Identity-based discipline doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. Clarity reduces friction. Reduced friction increases consistency. When willpower disappears, identity remains. And when identity is clear, discipline no longer feels like resistance. It feels like alignment. That is why identity outlasts motivation. It is why discipline built on identity survives weakness. You don't need more willpower. You need a clearer answer to who you are, especially when things feel difficult. Once that answer is established, action becomes simpler, even on the days when everything inside you feels empty. Because identity does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you do. Repeatedly. Chapter 7. Private discipline creates public strength. Most of the discipline that shapes your life happens in silence. No audience, no recognition, no immediate reward. That is exactly why it matters. Weakness often feels unbearable because it is private. No one sees the internal resistance, the hesitation, the mental fatigue. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. But inside, everything feels heavy. This is where many people lose momentum. They believe that if no one sees the effort, it doesn't count. If there's no external pressure, no praise, no visible consequence, discipline feels optional. It isn't. Private discipline is what creates public strength. I learned this when I noticed how different my internal state was from how people perceived me. On the outside, things looked stable. On the inside, says consistency was being built quietly, often painfully, without validation. And that quiet effort was doing more than I realized. Every private act of discipline reinforced something fundamental: self-respect. Self-respect is not built through achievements alone. It is built through follow-through when no one is watching. Weakness loses its grip when you know, not believe, but know, that you will act regardless of external conditions. I saw this clearly in someone I knew who made a dramatic change in his life. People later called him disciplined, focused, even lucky. What they never saw were the months of unremarkable effort, early mornings with no energy, evenings where quitting would have been easy, days where the only victory was not giving up. There was no applause, no encouragement, just repetition. Public strength is always misunderstood. People assume it comes from confidence, talent, or momentum. In reality, it is the accumulation of private decisions made consistently over time. Weakness hates privacy. It prefers excuses to be shared. It prefers comfort to be justified. Discipline does the opposite. It does not explain itself. It does not announce itself. It simply repeats. When you act in private despite weakness, you build a quiet authority over yourself. You stop needing permission. You stop seeking validation. And that changes how you move in the world. You speak with less hesitation. You tolerate discomfort more easily. You trust yourself under pressure. That trust is not psychological. It is earned. Many people chase confidence without realizing confidence is a side effect, not a goal. To the goal is reliability, knowing you will show up even when no one is forcing you. That reliability comes from private discipline. I noticed that the more I respected my own commitments in private, the less I needed external pressure. Deadlines mattered less. Opinions mattered less. Even outcomes mattered less. What mattered was alignment. Weekdays no longer felt threatening because I wasn't trying to prove anything publicly. I was simply honoring private agreements. This is why discipline practiced in silence is so powerful. There is no performance. There is no comparison. There is only execution. And execution builds strength quietly, steadily, without drama. Most people underestimate the compound effect of unseen effort. They focus on visible milestones and ignore the invisible foundation beneath them. But foundations determine durability. Public strength without private discipline is fragile. Private discipline without public recognition is unstoppable. The goal is not to appear disciplined. The goal is to be dependable when no one is watching. When you build discipline privately, weakness becomes manageable. It loses its influence because it has no audience to appeal to. You stop needing to feel strong. You already know what you do when things feel difficult. That knowledge changes how you carry yourself, even before results show. And when results do show, they look effortless to others. They never are. They are simply the visible outcome of countless private moments where discipline won. Moments no one saw. Moments weakness didn't control. That is where real strength comes from. Private discipline does something else that few people talk about. It changes how you experience pressure. When discipline is practiced only when others are watching, pressure feels external. It comes from expectations, deadlines, opinions, consequences. And when that pressure disappears, behavior collapses. But when discipline is practiced privately, pressure becomes internal and manageable. You stop relying on urgency to move. You stop needing fear to act. You stop waiting for someone or something to force you forward. That shift is subtle but profound. I noticed this when situations that used to overwhelm me started to feel neutral. Not easy, neutral. Stressful conversations, demanding tasks, uncertain outcomes no longer triggered panic or avoidance. Not because I became fearless, but because I had trained myself to respond instead of react. Private discipline creates emotional tolerance. When you repeatedly act without applause, you learn to sit with discomfort. You learn that effort does not require validation. You learn that progress does not need to be visible to be real. That tolerance transfers everywhere. You become calmer under pressure because pressure is no longer new. You've practiced acting without reassurance countless times in private. This is why people who rely on external accountability often feel strong only when watched. Take away supervision, and behavior weakens. Private discipline removes that dependency. You become your own reference point. I saw this clearly in someone who used to thrive only in competitive environments. When no one was watching, his standards dropped. Over time, he realized he was outsourcing discipline to external pressure. So he changed one thing. He started doing difficult things deliberately when no one could see them. Not to prove anything, not to build an image, to build independence. That decision changed how he handled stress. He no longer needed urgency to function. He no longer waited for pressure to justify action. He had already practiced it in silence. Private discipline also protects you from comparison. When effort is public, comparison is inevitable. You measure yourself against others' results, timelines, and visibility. That comparison distorts judgment and erodes patience. In private, comparison fades. You stop asking how fast others are moving. You stop wondering if you're behind. You focus on execution, not optics. Knowing that focus preserves momentum. Weakness often grows when comparison enters the picture. You feel inadequate, late, or inferior, and those feelings make action harder. Private discipline removes that noise. It anchors you in process instead of outcome. I noticed that the more I worked quietly, the less I cared about being seen as disciplined. And paradoxically, the more reliable I became. Reliability doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself over time. People begin to trust you not because you speak confidently, but because your actions are consistent. Not because you appear strong, but because you don't disappear when things get difficult. That trust starts internally. When you know you will act regardless of recognition, your confidence becomes grounded. It's no longer tied to success or approval. It's tied to identity. Private discipline also reshapes how you define success. Success stops being something that happens publicly, promotions, praise, milestones, and becomes something that happens daily, quietly, through follow-through. That redefinition is stabilizing. Public outcomes fluctuate. Private execution does not. When discipline is internalized, setbacks lose their sting. You don't spiral because one result didn't go your way. You return to the process. Process is where strength is built. Weakness loses leverage when your sense of progress is not dependent on visibility. You stop feeling like effort is wasted just because it's unseen. Nothing done in alignment with your standards is wasted. Every private act compounds. It sharpens attention. It strengthens self-trust. It deepens resilience. And resilience is what allows public strength to emerge naturally. People often admire outcomes without understanding the temperament behind them. They see confidence, clarity, stability, but not the quiet discipline that made those traits inevitable. Private discipline creates a kind of gravity. You don't chase recognition. You don't force authority. It develops around you because you are consistent under pressure. This is why private discipline must come first. Public strength built without it is unstable. Private discipline built patiently becomes unshakable. When weakness shows up, and it will, private discipline holds the line. There is no audience to impress, no image to protect, only a standard to honor. And honoring that standard, day after day, in silence, is what turns discipline into strength that lasts. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Chapter 8. Repeat. Until discipline becomes automatic. At the beginning, discipline always feels forced. It feels unnatural, heavy, resistant. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your current patterns are stronger than your intentions. Weakness dominates early because habits haven't been replaced yet. This is the stage where most people quit. They assume that if discipline still feels uncomfortable, it means they're doing it wrong. They expect effort to disappear quickly. They expect consistency to feel natural. It doesn't. Not at first. Discipline feels forced until repetition rewires behavior. I didn't understand this early on. I thought discipline was supposed to feel empowering. I expected a shift in emotion, confidence, motivation, clarity. What I got instead was repetition without reward. The same actions, the same resistance, the same quiet effort, and for a while, nothing seemed to change. But something was changing. It just wasn't visible yet. Every repeated action was reducing friction. Every completed task was lowering resistance. Every time I acted without debate, my brain learned something new. This is normal now. That's how discipline becomes automatic. Not through inspiration, through exposure. You don't force yourself forever. You force yourself long enough for the behavior to no longer feel foreign. This is the part most people misjudge. They stop right before the shift happens. They quit when discipline is still conscious, before it becomes subconscious. Automatic discipline is not intense. It's boring. And that's the point. When discipline becomes automatic, you no longer need to motivate yourself. You don't need to convince yourself. You don't need to rely on identity or structure as actively. You simply act. The behavior happens before resistance has time to form. I noticed this when tasks that once felt heavy started to feel neutral. Not exciting, not painful, just normal. That neutrality is power, because when an action feels neutral, weakness has nothing to push against. Weakness relies on resistance. It needs friction to exist. When repetition removes friction, weakness loses influence. I saw this clearly in someone who had struggled with consistency for years. At first, every action required effort. Every day felt like a decision. After months of repetition, something changed. He didn't feel more motivated. He didn't feel more inspired. He simply stopped thinking about it. Discipline moved from the front of his mind to the background of his life. That's the goal, not to feel disciplined, but to live in a way where discipline is no longer a conscious struggle. This only happens through repetition, not perfect repetition, not intense repetition, reliable repetition. The same behavior, in the same context, with the same expectations, over and over again. Weekdays still existed, but they didn't disrupt behavior anymore. That's when discipline stops being something you force and becomes something you default to. Defaults are powerful. They operate without effort. They activate automatically. Most people fail because their defaults are built around comfort. So when weakness shows up, comfort activates. Your task is to replace those defaults. Not all at once, not aggressively, gradually. Each repetition strengthens the new pattern. Each completed action weakens the old one. This is not dramatic work. It's quiet, and that's why it works. The final stage of discipline is not control. It's absence of resistance. You no longer fight yourself. You no longer negotiate. You simply move. When discipline becomes automatic, life simplifies. Decisions decrease. Energy is conserved. Progress becomes predictable. That predictability creates freedom. Freedom from constant self-management. Freedom from emotional swings. Freedom from relying on motivation. This is why forcing yourself at the beginning is necessary. You are not forcing discipline forever. You are forcing it until it no longer needs force. That is the trade. Short-term discomfort for long-term stability. Weakness will always exist, but once discipline becomes automatic, as weakness loses its ability to derail you. It may slow you down. It may change the pace. But it will no longer change the direction, and when direction is stable, progress is inevitable. That is the quiet power of discipline repeated long enough. Not felt, not announced, just lived. Repetition does more than automate behavior. It reshapes how you see yourself. At first, discipline feels like something you're doing. Over time, it becomes something you are. This transition is subtle. You don't wake up one day feeling transformed. There's no clear moment where effort suddenly disappears. Instead, there is a gradual quieting inside you. Less inner dialogue, less resistance, less emotional turbulence around simple actions. That silence is progress. Most people underestimate how exhausting it is to constantly negotiate with themselves. Every internal argument drains energy. Every delayed decision consumes attention. When discipline becomes automatic, those drains are sealed. Your mind becomes clearer, not because life is easier, but because fewer decisions are being made. This is why repetition is not optional. It is the mechanism. Without repetition, discipline remains fragile. With repetition, it becomes infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't require belief. It doesn't need enthusiasm. It simply functions. I noticed this shift when I stopped monitoring my own consistency. I no longer checked in emotionally to see if I felt aligned or motivated. I trusted the process enough to let it run without supervision. That trust didn't come from optimism. It came from evidence. Repeated evidence that I would act regardless of mood. And that evidence changed my internal posture. I stopped identifying as someone trying to be disciplined. Trying implies effort. It implies uncertainty. It implies the possibility of quitting. I became someone who simply followed through. That identity wasn't declared, it was earned. This is an important distinction. Most people try to change how they feel about discipline before they change how they behave. They wait to feel confident, committed, or inspired. Repetition reverses that order. Behavior changes first, feeling follows later, and sometimes feeling never follows. But behavior remains consistent anyway. That is real discipline. It doesn't rely on emotional reinforcement. It relies on momentum. Momentum is created by doing the same thing long enough that stopping feels stranger than continuing. At that point, weakness no longer feels like a threat. It becomes noise, present but irrelevant. You still feel tired. You still feel resistance. You still have days where effort feels heavier, but those feelings no longer dictate outcomes. They exist alongside action, not in control of it. This is where many people misunderstand the goal. They believe discipline is about feeling in control at all times. It's not. Discipline is about building systems that work even when you don't feel in control. Automatic discipline creates that safety net. It catches you when emotions drop. It stabilizes you when motivation fades. It keeps direction intact when energy fluctuates. This is why discipline should be boring. Boring means predictable. Predictable means reliable. Reliable means resilient. The more dramatic your approach to discipline, the less sustainable it becomes. Drama requires emotion. Emotion requires energy. Energy is inconsistent. Repetition requires none of that. It only requires time. And time applied consistently changes everything. I've seen people chase transformation through intensity. Extreme routines, rigid challenges, short bursts of effort. They burn bright and disappear. I've also seen people change their lives through repetition so unremarkable it was almost invisible. Same actions, same schedule, same expectations, month after month. Those are the people who become stable, calm, grounded, unshakable. Not because they are stronger than others, but because their discipline no longer depends on strength. And this is the final promise of repetition. You stop managing yourself. You stop constantly correcting, motivating, pushing, or negotiating. Life becomes simpler, clearer, less reactive. Discipline fades into the background, and that's when it's most powerful. Because when discipline is automatic, you're free to focus on living, not forcing. Freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the absence of chaos, and repetition builds that structure quietly, patiently, without asking for attention. If you feel weak now, that does not disqualify you. It positions you perfectly. Weakness is where repetition begins, and repetition is what turns discipline into something you no longer have to think about. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel strong. But you only need to repeat long enough for discipline to stop feeling like an effort and start feeling like who you are. That is when forcing ends, and discipline stays. Weakness never leaves permanently. No matter how disciplined you become, there will be days when your energy drops, your focus scatters, and your emotions feel heavier than usual. Life does not reward progress with permanent strength. It simply offers new forms of resistance. The difference is this: weakness no longer controls direction. Earlier in your life, weakness may have decided when you stopped, when you delayed, when you lowered your standards entirely. It may have dictated your pace, your confidence, and your self-image. But discipline changes the relationship, not by eliminating weakness, but by making it irrelevant. This audiobook was never about becoming a flawless, hyper-productive version of yourself. That idea is fragile. It collapses the moment reality interferes. This was about something far more durable, and learning how to move forward when nothing inside you feels aligned. Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. Your life will not be shaped by how you feel on good days. It will be shaped by how you act on bad ones. When you feel weak, everything inside you argues for comfort. Rest feels justified. Delay feels reasonable. Avoidance feels earned. And sometimes, rest is necessary. But retreat is optional. Discipline exists to separate the two. It helps you rest without quitting. It helps you slow down without losing direction. It helps you protect momentum when motivation disappears. Throughout this audiobook, one pattern has repeated itself. Discipline works best when it is quiet, simple, and unglamorous. It works when you remove choice, when you lower standards but protect consistency. And when you design systems for bad days instead of ideal ones, when you act based on identity rather than willpower, when you practice discipline privately, without validation, and when you repeat long enough for effort to become automatic. None of these ideas are dramatic. That is why they work. Most people fail not because they lack knowledge, but because they chase intensity instead of reliability. They look for breakthroughs when what they need is follow-through. They wait to feel strong before acting, and end up waiting indefinitely. You no longer need to do that. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need clarity. You don't need motivation. You need alignment. Alignment between what you say matters and what you do when it doesn't feel convenient. That alignment is built one decision at a time, usually on days no one else notices. As weakness tries to convince you that those small decisions don't matter, they matter most. Every time you act when you feel weak, you send a message to yourself that cannot be replaced by words or affirmations. You say, "I do not disappear when things get uncomfortable. I keep my word even when no one is watching. I can be trusted under pressure." That message becomes identity, and identity changes behavior without effort. At some point, discipline will stop feeling like something you force. Not because you've become stronger, but because you've become consistent. Consistency removes drama. Drama feeds weakness. When discipline becomes part of your default behavior, life simplifies. You no longer waste energy debating with yourself. You no longer depend on emotional states to determine action. You act, then you move on. This is where real freedom begins. Freedom is not doing whatever you feel like. That is reactivity. Freedom is knowing that your life will continue moving forward even when you don't feel at your best. That stability creates calm. That calm creates confidence. That confidence creates options, and options create freedom. You may still feel weak tomorrow. You may still feel tired next week. You may still doubt yourself again. None of that disqualifies you. Discipline does not require belief. It requires repetition. Start small, make it inevitable. Repeat it. Let discipline carry you when strength is absent. You don't need to win every day. You need to refuse to quit on the days that matter most. Those days rarely feel important in the moment. They only reveal their value later. And one day, without noticing when it happened, because you will realize something quietly powerful. You no longer ask whether you can handle discomfort. You already know the answer because you have proven it to yourself repeatedly. Not through motivation, not through inspiration, but through action when it would have been easier to stop. That is discipline, not loud, not impressive, but steady enough to change the direction of your life. If you take nothing else from this audiobook, remember this. You are not weak because you struggle. You struggle because you are human. Discipline is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to move forward anyway. And that decision, repeated long enough, is more powerful than strength ever was. When you feel weak next time, don't wait for it to pass. Act small, act quietly, act consistently. That is how discipline is built. And that is how weakness loses its hold. Not all at once, but for good.